Welcome to season 4 of the Gastric Mindset podcast. My name's Safi. We will continue to have great conversations, heal from dieting trauma, and recover from yo-yo dieting together. Hello everybody, welcome to a special episode of the Gastric Mindset. Today we're going to be speaking about Mounjaro, GLP-1s, and eating disorders and disordered eating and the impact that those two have on each other. I'm going to introduce my guest. Hello, Ronnie. How are you? Did I pronounce your name right? I'm so bad at names.
Oh, no, you're perfect. That's absolutely perfect. Yes. Yeah, I'm okay. Thank you. Thanks for having me today, Safi. It's so nice to see you.
Fantastic. So we both have established that it's Eating Disorder Awareness Week, both in the UK and America. So it's a great week to be connecting. Tell me a bit about the people you work with.
I'm an eating disorder recovery coach, and my clients are those who are struggling mostly with binge eating. I do have some bulimic clients, but I would say the majority of them are binge eaters, and they've been binge eaters for decades. And it's a matter of getting through, their childhood beliefs and separating emotions from food and dismantling diet culture and self-care are the main pillars of what I would go through to help them recover from binge eating. And yeah, I've been really fortunate to have, pretty good success rates, which is so rewarding for me because I was a binge eater for 30 years and I'm 17 years recovered. So for me to pay forward my recovery is just, I feel like that's my passion and that's why I was put here.
Amazing. That sounds great. And we connected a while ago and we wanted to have this podcast, and one thing after the other, it just got pushed back. But maybe it was because we were meant to have this conversation this week. And,
Absolutely.
We're going to be talking about weight loss injections, GLP-1s. And I would love you because, as I was saying, it's quite new. Well, it's new everywhere, and it's we need to all get to grips with it and learn how to support people. People who are going to be taking it and so on. So, how's that impacted your practice? What is that like on a day-to-day basis of supporting?
I only have currently 2 clients right now who are on the GLP-1s. They're both weaning, which is a great thing. And I'm really happy to hear. And much like, anybody else who's a binge eater and is more often than not going to be, the scale, unfortunately, keeps going up with all the binge eating. They want that weight off quickly, right? I know I went through that myself when my clothes were getting small and I had to go buy new clothes and the number on the scale was going up. It's very upsetting. And, I would have loved to have had some kind of quick fix for that, but that would have never gotten to the underlying problem of why I was, binge eating in the first place. So the people that I'm working with right now, I didn't have to deal with the GLP-1s too much, thank goodness, because they were already weaning off of it. They already came to the conclusion themselves that this wasn't such a great idea for my eating disorder. And so I was fortunate that I didn't have to go head to head with them on trying to really, talk about this with them.
Amazing. And I think, obviously the evidence, the data, the years to come, this will all become a lot clearer. But tell me some of your concerns around, I suspect we've got similar concerns, but tell me, with the fact that you've been working in this field a lot longer than I have, what are some of your, let's be frank, what are some of the red flags for people with binge eating disorder?
Yeah, I feel like Wegovy and Ozempic and Mounjaro, like you said, and other, these weight loss, these GLP-1s, I feel like they're no different than just kind of going on a diet, that they're just a temporary fix that does nothing to address the underlying problem. An eating disorder is so much more deep-rooted than, wanting the compulsion to want to, kind of stuff your face all the time. There's so much more to it than that. And while I understand that these drugs help, they are appetite suppressants. And while that's terrific if you're a binge eater, it's nice. But I also know that as a former binge eater myself, my hunger cues had nothing to do with my day-to-day life. I was so out of touch with my hunger cues and my fullness cues that I was still binging whether I was hungry or not. So, one of the things I think about is that even though it's supposed to be an appetite suppressant, that doesn't always help the binge eater because they're not always going by their hunger cues.
Sure.
And I feel like just in general that if you are, and I feel like just also, when Oprah was on about a year or so ago, and she was, saying that, the weight loss revolution and how these GLP-1s are the greatest thing ever. And she had like maybe it was an hour-long show and only like 30 seconds was on any negative ramifications or side effects of it. Everything was, this is the greatest thing. If you are overweight, that this is the greatest thing for you. And I really felt that there was just a total lack of consideration for eating disorders. And while I realize that there are people who really are obese and have medical issues and really could benefit from the GLP-1, that most people, as you mentioned, are more on the diet culture need for wanting to get that quick weight loss instead.
Yeah, I know. I agree. And the fact is, Oprah was jumping on Weight Watchers. Wasn't that her thing before this? And
Right.
she needs she needs to support herself. But anyway, that's a conversation for another day. But as the bariatric community, I think there's a lot of us that obesity is, it's an illness in itself and it's important, but a lot of us, it's just not just obesity that we struggle with. We struggle with loads of different components. It all comes together. And disordered eating, whether a lot of people know that they may have binge eating disorder, they just have disordered eating, or it's there, right? I think it's all, it comes together. And so the idea of people finally finding that relief, and weight loss surgery also gives you that honeymoon relief, that still food noise, it quietens the food noise down. And I'm all for that, right? I'm all for having a tool. But what I'm seeing is that people are using these injections while having an underlying disordered eating or eating disorder, and also just to go and lose that 9 pounds again and again, and I can see how that journey is going to plan out, you know?
Right, right. And I think a lot of the time, in all honesty, there are people who have binge eating disorder and they may not even really be aware of it. I mean, I know for me personally, for like, until I was about 40, I had no idea that what I was doing was binge eating. I mean, there wasn't social media. I mean, this was, 17 years ago for me. Before there was all this social media, the only eating disorders that people really talked about were really anorexia and then maybe some bulimia, but mainly anorexia was like the eating disorder. So I didn't even know that I had one until, this one crazy night while I happened watching television and I heard the words compulsive overeater. And that sort of struck a chord with me at that moment for some reason. And I started Googling on the computer and I found out that this is an eating disorder. And this was, and a mental health issue. And this was really kind of shocking for me. I had no idea. I mean, on the one hand, I thought what I was doing with all the food was normal and that, this was just my life and I'd been doing it for 30 years and this is me and this is what I do. I didn't know there was a name for it. But then finding out there was a name for it, like I said, was very shocking. But then it was also, in a way, a relief because I learned that you can recover from an eating disorder. So it was twofold and it was really a catalyst for me jumping off on my recovery journey. But what I was going to say is there are people who do have an eating disorder, and they go to their doctor because they want to, and they're, obese or, very overweight, and they want to lose the weight. And the doctors these days aren't even saying to you, well, do you have an eating disorder? You know what I mean? So I think there's like a lack of knowledge about that out there in the general, scheme of things that, maybe they go to their doctor because they want to take the weight off and that the doctor doesn't even mention, do you have an eating disorder? Maybe do you need help for that?
It's the same in the UK because the doctor gets 10 minutes with you. General practitioners have very little training about eating disorders, just in general, statistically. So because a lot of people, I think, don't want to live on, on this cycle of yo-yo dieting or taking weight loss injections for the rest of their life, and everybody would want to recover, but it seems really hard for some people. So, I love the fact that you were able to share a bit about that. What was your journey to recovery like?
So I mentioned that the catalyst was just actually finding out that I, in fact, had an eating disorder, that this is what my crazy obsession and compulsion with food was about. So, based upon what I was Googling and finding out about it, I sort of attacked it in four ways. I had like this four-prong attack. One was I needed to find a therapist. I needed to find somebody I wanted to get to the bottom of this eating disorder. I wanted to get to the root. I learned that it was important to get to the root of the problem. So that was probably one of the biggest things I did that I would give the most credence to for how I recovered. Second was I started to go to Overeaters Anonymous meetings, or OA. Now, I didn't follow this 12-step program. The first step was enough for me. The first step was, my life's out of hand and I'm powerless over food. I didn't love the idea of the 12-step program of having to eliminate certain foods from my life, or eliminate certain foods for like the rest of my life. I didn't like that idea. That didn't sit well with me. And I thought that the therapy and getting to the root of it was more important. However, being in those OA rooms helped me feel so much less alone. And I could like look around a room and I saw people, men, women, tall, short, thin, in a larger body, different socioeconomic status. And all these people had the same problem that I did with food, that they were obsessed with it and, couldn't stop stuffing their faces with it. We all had different backstories, of course, but just to sit in a room with other people who like got you, because other people in my life could never, I don't think that anybody can fully understand an addiction like that unless you have it yourself. So I found a lot of comfort in that. I also started reading a lot of books about other people who, went through the recovery journey and came out the other side. And that actually prompted me later on, 4 years ago, I wrote a book actually about my recovery journey. It's called, little plug here, shameless plug, called Out of the Pantry, A Disordered Eating Journey. So that was my whole journey of my memoir, of the throes of what it's like to be in the head of somebody who's a binge eater and then getting through recovery. And the last thing that I did was I started, I akin this to journaling, but I started an anonymous blog because I found that the fact that I had this eating disorder was very shameful and embarrassing for me. And so I started a blog, Confessions of a Compulsive Overeater. And I found a community online for that as well. So I could brain dump my crazy thoughts and my crazy feelings, and all these crazy things about food. And I found that other people understood and I could help support them and they could help support me. So that was like my four-pronged attack, those four different things that I did to get on my road to recovery. And yeah, it's been 17 years now.
Amazing.
So yeah, I'm really grateful for that recovery. For sure. In one way I can remember like yesterday what it was like to be in the throes of the binge eating, but then it's been so long since I've done anything like that. So it's interesting, but overall I'm just very grateful to be in the position that I am today.
Amazing. And I'll put the book, if you send me, I'll put the details of the book. It's
Thanks.
amazing. And I love reading stuff like that because it makes it, so much more real for people and myself. And I love all those ideas and journaling, and it's amazing. But so 40 years, so before that, what was your relationship? Can you remember what your relationship with food and weight was like?
Well, it started when I was around 9. So I don't have a ton of memories. I think I was always athletic. I think I want to say that, well, maybe this is wrong to say that I ate like any other normal kid.
Sure.
It wasn't until about 9 that my mom started hiding sweets from me without any discussion or talking about it. She just started hiding food from me and never said anything. And that was the beginning of my then, all the messages that I internalized from that. Why aren't I good enough to eat this food? Why don't I deserve the food? Aren't I worthy? Now, of course, these are messages I realized that in therapy, those were the messages that I got. But back then, I was like, well, if my mom's going to hide this from me, then I'm just going to go get it myself. And that started my trips to the supermarket around the corner to get, a whole, a half gallon of ice cream or a big bag of candy or a package of cookies. And then I would eat those in one sitting with nobody home. And then, of course, hide the evidence, bury it deep in the empty packaging or wrappers, put that deep in the bottom of the trash so that nobody would find it, because I would be embarrassed if anybody saw that. But I think prior to that, I was an athletic kid. I was playing on the boys' baseball team and just, playing in the neighborhood. So I don't think I really thought about my weight by the age of 9. I don't think that started kicking in until probably about adolescence or so, when I would then, start to compare myself to other people, and other people would make comments about my weight, that kind of thing.
I wonder what made your mom want to restrict your intake.
I think my mom saw that I was eating. My mom would go shopping once a week. And so all the food that she got needed to roughly, last a week or so. It's not like today where we run out at the drop of a hat and run to the market for something that we're out of, or, that kind of thing, on the fly. So she went once a week, and that was her routine. And, the food had to, basically last for those 7 days.
Wow.
And apparently, I can only guess that she saw that I was eating more than what I should be eating, more than my share. I was eating too much, and I was not leaving enough for the family to also be able to have, a package of cookies. So without mentioning anything to me about it, she just started hiding it. And I would search the kitchen, I would search that pantry, really searching, and by gosh, I could never find those cookies or the chips or whatever she hid from me that week. I could never find it. But it was just, and that was that whole lack of communication and lack of nurturing in the house. That was also a very big reason why I had the eating disorder in the first place, because there was no thoughtful or supportive conversations in our house. Everything was just kept in. There was no closeness in our family. There was really no sense of family. And yeah, there was just not that, that kind of empathetic support that a child needs growing up. So yeah, it wasn't, my mom did it. She didn't tell me about it. And that was just that. I just had to live with whatever her actions were without knowing really why.
Yeah. And it's that food scarcity, isn't it? That was the trigger of it, would have been. Right. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And usually I would want to know a bit about, what was her relationship with food like. But, in this day and age, we communicate with our children very differently. We've got so much knowledge. And sometimes for our parents, they didn't know what they didn't know, right? So, yeah,
Right.
No, fair enough. If we just going back to somebody today who is hearing this for the first time, because I think sometimes we can be in an echo chamber and we all follow each other's, social media, and we think we all know, everybody knows everything. And then I speak to somebody and it's all fresh news to them. So if we're thinking about the person who suspects there's something going on, they like food and they're thinking about food, but then don't know if, they don't have the name for it, or they don't know exactly what's going on. Because I see a lot of clients and they berate themselves. They're so critical with the way they speak about themselves. What are some of those things that somebody, what can we give them that they can start thinking, that, give them signs of what to look out for, essentially, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, I'm not sure but can you rephrase that?
Sure. I guess I'm just trying to say is, for somebody who just thought they just eat too much. Simple as that. A society said they're greedy and there's nothing else possibly going on, but then they're occupied by food and they've got all those. So I just want a tangible kind of signs for somebody to look out for. So what will be some of those signs that you would look out for when somebody, you have a discovery call with somebody, let's say?
Right. Well, essentially, usually when I have a discovery call, it's somebody who already knows that they have binge eating disorder.
Sure.
But basically, if your whole life is about food and eating it and, where you're going to get it and where you're going to eat it and how you're going to get it, and everything else is almost kind of secondary, then that's definitely a sign that, you have an eating disorder. If you're not, as I mentioned earlier, not in touch with any fullness cues or any hunger cues, and you just eat, large amounts of food in a short amount of time, and then feel really bad about yourself afterwards, that's certainly, the sign of binge eating disorder as well.
Sure. And there's another, for my community, there's another added factor of, because we've had weight loss surgery, also that gauging of when you're really, when you're really full is harder, because, you can push it a little bit and think, it's because I've got this tiny stomach now. So they're not eating these huge plates because we can't physically eat these huge. But then you're overeating. So that's a great way to look at it, because I'm always trying to simplify for people so they know that they're just not this person who just is out of control, but there is a biological reasons why these all things happen.
Right.
But yeah, amazing. With the rise of, I guess earlier you said about the fact that all you've heard of before was about anorexia and bulimia, and the fact that, binge eating is very much a new form. Well, I suspect it's been, people have had it for forever, but it's just now being recognized by the medical and so on. What is your feelings about how much information is out there about binge eating?
Yeah, there's not enough information out there, I don't think. Like you had said a little earlier, that the medical community hasn't been educated so much or trained in eating disorders. I think more and more is getting out there as, the years are going on, and that more people are aware of it, and that's, partially, what you and I do as well, right? Trying to get out messages about that and getting that out on social media so that people, it's super isolating when you have an eating disorder and you feel so alone, and it's so shameful. And you know, to learn and find out that you're not alone is just so important, I think. And, admitting that you may have a problem, that your eating is disordered, and that you have an eating disorder is just really important. And I think the more information that's out there, the more you would learn that you're not alone. Because that is a really lonely feeling, to just feel like, I just love to eat all the time. I eat beyond fullness. I get to the point where I feel, my body feels physically ill and so uncomfortable, but I just can't stop eating. I feel helpless and I feel powerless.
Yeah. And this dilemma of wanting to have weight loss and then recover also at the same time.
Right.
It's a hard one, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I tell people when I have the intake call, that I'm not here to help them lose weight. I don't want to hear about weight. I don't want to, we're not talking about this. This is about recovering from your eating disorder. And I generally find that as you're recovering and binging less, that a side effect is that weight comes off, right? Because you're just not taking in all those calories from binging. So I would, I don't say naturally. I mean, there's also hormones and, all these other things that are involved. But, in general, if you're not taking in all those calories, and that gets cut down tremendously as time goes on, that the weight will come off in conjunction with the recovery, just simply by virtue of, calories coming in being that much less from all the calories that you take in when you're binge eating. And when that goes away and you're just eating, healthy meals and snacks, for the most part healthy, doesn't always have to be healthy. All foods fit as far as I'm concerned. There's room for everything. That generally, the weight does come down.
And I think the one thing I battle the most with is, even with myself, is patience. And if you throw in other diagnoses such as ADHD and, neurodiversity in general, is that need for, I wanted everything like yesterday.
Right.
Not
sooner.
Yeah. So I find that really difficult sometimes, is letting people know it's going to take a bit of time.
Right.
But the long-term impact of recovery and food freedom is, it's going to be amazing. And I wonder, that's another thing that I struggle with these GLP-1s, is that it's just another shiny object, just another thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So what are some of your, if you get down to the nitty gritty, what are some of your concerns about the GLP?
Yeah, I just think, as you had said, that diet culture has taken over. It's just not so much the medical community, like, oh my goodness, somebody's obese, they have diabetes, they have other ailments because of, maybe because of the obesity and because of all the eating and just all the unhealthiness in their body, that, which, like we said, we get that, and there's a place for the GLP-1s. But if you're just trying to, take off 10 pounds or something, and you want that quick fix, everybody wants that magical thing that's going to have the weight drop off like yesterday, as you said, then I don't think I think that you need to more, and not go on a diet, because I think diets are a bunch of bull, to be honest. I think you should just be on a healthy stream of eating, not to be on something that's supposed to be also like a quick fix. And again, that's just putting on a Band-Aid on something that needs surgery. Yeah. So I don't like the whole idea of a quick fix. I think there's just so much more rooted in the eating disorder, and that you really can get, as opposed to the GLP-1 that you have to keep buying. So there's the expense of it, right? And you have to keep injecting yourself, and who knows what these side effects are. If you go through recovery, which is a marathon and not a sprint,
Sure.
and it's a journey for sure, then that's going to be your lifelong food freedom and peace with food,
Yeah.
as you said.
Yeah. You know what? I just realized I asked you that question before, but so my apologies, but I guess I'm trying to I'm learning, and I'm really eager to learn. We're learning with everybody else, so that's why I guess I, wanted to ask you that question yet again. But I totally agree. It's the fact that it's a quick fix, or is it's the idea that, just use these injections and your problems will be solved. And sometimes on TikTok, I see people saying, your food noise is gone forever, your food issues are gone forever, and now you're like, oh, mate, no.
Right.
It's,
No, it's not. It's not.
and I think, like you said earlier about celebrities jumping into it, and pharmaceutical companies are in for one, their main business is just to sell medication.
Sure. It's all about making money. Sure.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Nobody really cares about you, or what what the repercussions might be of a drug like that. They're just trying to make money.
sure. And sometimes I think, oh, but so are we. We're looking for, we're working with people. But the reality is, the difference between us, who are people who recovered and really understand the struggle, lived experience, compared to, I have nothing against scientists, and they're amazing, or doctors, whoever they are, the pharmaceuticals. But, they've got no idea. They just, they're finding a solution for a problem, and that's it. So yeah, it's just, I think it'd be really irresponsible of us to not share our concerns, and because at the risk of getting cancelled. Not that I, because I think, oh, they get cancelled. But who's even really listening to me to get cancelled? But so so for us, we have, I guess it's our passion, and even if one person, for me, even if one person really recovers from disordered eating, binge eating, and has a better relationship with themselves and their body, my life work is done. And that's all
Yeah.
I really care about. So, and that's why I have this podcast. So I guess we're both on the same page as that. So earlier I was asking you about how the fact that you're just a little bit ahead of us, that in America the medication was, I guess, used more for weight loss a bit earlier than us. So is there anything you want to add about what you've seen in America, and how it's, what's the impact out there, and what is happening, what could we be expecting in the months and years to come?
That's a good question. Not sure that I can answer that. I have the wherewithal. Yeah, not sure I have the magic ball to answer that. Yeah, it's just really prevalent here. And I think some people are a little shy about the fact that they're taking that drug
Yeah.
to try to lose weight. I don't think people shouted from the rooftops. I think there's a level of, a little bit of embarrassment that that's what they had to go to, instead of just, maybe seeking help for their eating disorder, or just getting their weight under control in, some other way. And that, people see them and go, oh my gosh, you lost so much weight. And, oh yeah, it's because I'm taking or Manjaro, or, something like that.
And
That's what what I find anyway.
yeah, and I'm sad that it's people feel shame about it as well. That's another aspect that I empathize with people feeling shame, because bariatric surgery is very much the same. You felt shame in regards to some people. So I feel sad for those people, and the fact that we have to get to a stage where we're so desperate that it's society's almost, I think diet culture letting us down and letting those people down to the extent that they, that we have to go to those extents. So I definitely have so much empathy for those people. And there's definitely no shame in it, but I think, and we're not shaming anybody here, but what we would like is for people to have, really look at what are your options, and what is the long-term impact of on your life, financially, emotionally, physically. And then if there is something underlying, like an eating disorder, getting that addressed. So, that's where I'm coming from. And I suspect you're very similar to my stance, right? Yeah. So, so tell me a bit more about, just how, so where do you do most of your work? Is it over Zoom? And tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I do most of my work over Zoom. It's been really fascinating, actually. I've had clients in the UK, client in Ireland, a client in Australia, and I love that, I get the opportunity to help people no matter where they are in the world. It doesn't just have to be in the United States. And I find that so interesting. And yeah, it's a 15-week program, or 15 sessions that I hope they go over the course of 15 weeks, and really get that. And my, goal is to really shift that mindset and help them to understand their childhood beliefs, that kind of, much like what happened to me, and all the messages that you internalize as a child from, probably some kind of trauma of some sort, whether it was, big, scary, horrible trauma, or just micro traumas like that I kind of went through, of my mother hiding food from me and there being no nurturing or, support or sense of family in the house. It can come from, I find that most commonly eating disorders do stem from that. And so going through that with them, and like I said, just really trying to help them separate emotions from food, that, you can have an emotion and that an emotion's not going to kill you, and that you can just be curious about that emotion and not have to just automatically, the knee-jerk reaction is to go eat your feelings away. And that's what's been going on, all this time. So I really work with them on that, and just like dismantling this diet culture that we're talking about, that, and body image issues, and everybody has to look a certain way. And that if you're skinny, then your world is perfect, which of course is absolutely not true. And, just also getting their self-care in place. I find that a lot of people who are binge eaters are also, like people pleasers, and they don't do very much care for themselves. There's no self-love, there's no self-care. So we work on that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I always say, the neighbor's dog comes before, so it's the children and the parents and the job, and then the dog, and then the neighbor's dog, and then they come after the neighbor. Which, they're amazing women, most of my clients, but it comes before them. And I guess society has set it up that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
As women, you're seen to be selfish if you putting your needs first. And so I think that's really important. And it always stems from somewhere. Whether earlier we were touching on that, transference addiction, whether it's to alcohol or, whatever, it served a purpose at some point.
Right. And also something that we mentioned earlier, I think before we started recording, that you might not have on the GLP-1, you might not have that food issue, but now maybe you have an alcohol issue because you're still trying to, help heal that inner child. You're still dealing with all these things from your past, from your emotions. So you just find another outlet, another addiction, to have or to go to for your coping mechanism instead of food. So that happens as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it could be shopping or the gym or
Yeah.
exercising.
Yeah.
It's because those feelings are there, and they need to be soothed. They need to be listened to. Something needs to.
Right.
Yeah, it's goodness me. Is there anything else? So I'm gonna let you go soon before I keep chatting about this for ages. But is there anything else that you want to add? Because sometimes I go off these interviews, I'm like, oh, could have asked one more question, or is there anything else? So if there's anything else for somebody who's listening, just perhaps struggling, right? Let me set the picture up there. They've had weight loss surgery a few years ago. They are now struggling, and they're realizing that this food, the history with food, there's always something else undercurrent running through it.
Hmm.
And now they feel like they've ruined the weight loss tool. Like, they failed yet another thing, So for
Right.
that person, what would be your advice on where to start?
Yeah. My advice would be to find a therapist or a coach,
Yep.
a therapist who's, has training in eating disorders. There's also so many, there's the NEDA, the National Eating Disorders Association. There's ANAD. There's a bunch of online presence that you can go to where there's meetings and support, and they have resources. So I would just say to don't keep struggling alone, and to, go get some kind of help. And maybe it is something like even like looking up going to OA meetings just to get that like-minded, to be with people to let you feel less alone. I think that's only one part of it, but I think there's just so much isolation, and there's comfort in knowing you're not the only person. But definitely I would say to seek professional help would be the most important.
For sure. And I think, there's also books like your book, there's podcasts, there's
Mhm.
so much information because for me, reading books and listening to podcasts made me feel that I wasn't the problem. It took away
Mm,
shame and that moral attachment to me being this weak-willed
right. Failure.
failure, hot mess. So, you said about the OA. Is there equivalent for eating disorders? Am I getting
Oh
them?
yeah, Overeaters Anonymous. Right. AA is Alcoholics Anonymous, but OA is Overeaters Anonymous.
And I think I've heard of another one. Maybe it's just UK based for that specialized for eating disorders, but I just can't remember. I know a client was going there, but she found it very rigid, a bit like the OA. It's a bit, food demonization
Yeah.
going on a lot. But there is another one, and I don't know if anybody wants to know, message me, I'll look it up. But those things, I think community is really important. And in this day and age, you can find your people online, which is great. But I do think one size fits nobody. I struggle
Hmm.
with that whole idea of, what works for you. For example, we both had our own struggles, but we're very different people with different backgrounds, different everything. So that
Hmm.
whole is only so far that so each person's individual and they need a holistic approach to the way that their recovery is going to be, right? Uh,
Hmm.
so you got a book, you got a practice, and then is there, I know you're on Instagram because that's where else are you? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I think you basically covered everything. And I do have a website, which is just my name. It's, www.ronnierobinson.com. And that tells you about my practice. And there's also a link to the book there. And if you wanted to have a free consultation, a take-in kind of call to see if we're good to work together.
Fab. Where is that blog? Is it up anymore? I guess we're not.
Oh goodness. I don't know if that's a great question. I haven't looked in a while to see if it still is. I'm not sure whether it is or not, to be honest.
uh,
I should know that, but I don't.
Yeah, I guess you were anonymous then. You probably wanted to stay that way, but that I guess
Right.
there's stuff like that out there that people are documenting their honest, raw.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure.
as they're going through it. Well, Ronnie, thank you so much. I will have all your details at the bottom of the episode, so everybody can connect with you. Please do go and connect with Ronnie, and the book will be there as well. And yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad we finally managed to record this episode.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me today. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you for being here with me. I hope you got some value from this episode. If so, please give me a review. It will make me super happy and support others from our community to find the podcast. Share it with your Barry bestie. Connect with me on Instagram at Gastric Mindset. It'll be wonderful to hear from you.